the meeting in order. I just wanted to give a shout out to Kyle Murray, fellow that hails from Coaldale, and he's going to be competing this coming week in World Championships of the extreme sport of skeleton, and February 11th and 13th. So his proud parents let us know about this, and it's awesome that a young fellow from Coaldale will be at that level. So we wish him all the best of luck. With that, I'd like to call the meeting to order. And is there anybody that needs to declare conflict of interest or pecuniary interest? Please indicate by waving. And nobody has indicated any potential conflict of interest or pecuniary interest, so that matter is dealt with. And we'll have item 2.0, adoption of the agenda. Is there anybody that cares to adopt the agenda? Councillor Lloyd moves the agenda as circulated. Any discussion? I don't see any. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's unanimous for Mayor Craig, Councillor Lloyd, Chapman, Holm, Paul, Simpson, and Avery. Then we'll go to item 3.1, regular council meeting minutes of January 18, 2021. Any errors or omissions? Does anybody care to adopt the minutes as circulated? Councillor Pauls makes that motion. Any discussion? I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's 7 in signifying in favor. So that's Mayor Craig, Councillor Lloyd, Chapman, Holm, Paul, Simpson, and Avery. So that's all carried unanimously. And then we have item 5.1. We have a delegation. No, that won't be till a little bit later. We have 6.1, the natural gas franchise agreement bylaw. And we have Kyle Beauchamp and guest from ATCO, Dan Magnum, to present on this matter. So take it away, Kyle.
Good evening, everyone. So with us today, again, we have Dan from ATCO. In front of you is the natural gas franchise fee agreement bylaw 800-AG-01-21 for first reading. Town of Coaldale's franchise agreement for the supply of natural gas with ATCO is set to expire in April of 2021 this year. With the agreement expiring, council must pass a bylaw authorizing the mayor and CEO to enter into a new franchise agreement. The draft agreement, which is referenced here as Schedule A, is attached to the bylaw for council's review. The franchise agreement attached was developed with the Utilities Commission and AUMA in 2015. The town's previous agreement was signed back in 2011, so it's approximately 10 years old. So what I have here is just kind of highlighted the changes between the two agreements, from the one the town's currently under to the proposed new agreement. So I won't go through these individually here, but they're all here and available to view. If you do have questions, we can go back to those. Part of the consideration of this is that town council has the ability to sign an agreement between 10 and 20 years. I believe historically over the past few agreements, town has signed 10-year agreements. So this is an area where administration would be looking for a little direction on council's preference, if they have one, whether they would just like to continue status quo with a 10-year or exceed that for 20 years. Following passing of the bylaw, it will be advertised in the Sunny South News for 2 weeks and request feedback from residents on this bylaw. So with that being said, I'm just going to turn it back over to council if they have any questions on this. We do have Dan available, ATCO, who can help clarify anything or questions that council may have.
Okay, thank you, Kyle. I'll open the floor up to members of council if they have any questions through to Kyle or Dan. I guess I question if there's any advice or counsel that could be given on 10 versus 20 years. Traditionally, it's been 10 years, I think. But so is there any benefit plus or minus on going longer? Or
I'll maybe let Dan touch base on that. Do you kind of have any comments on that, Dan?
Yeah, sure, Mayor Craig. There really is no benefit to a 10, 15, or 20-year term. It's all the same. It's really just what level administration and council, or level of comfort mayor and administrator, council and administration have in signing with ATCO.
okay, thank you, Dan. I think Councillor Simpson indicated she might have a question, and then Councillor Chapman. No, okay, Councillor Chapman, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Worship, and welcome, Dan. I wanted to just ask you, and maybe Kyle as well, whether there are any changes that occur from time to time with regards to any of the agreements. I know we signed 10 years at a time. Have there been traditionally any other changes?
Historically, you know, kind of going back, the agreements are reviewed every so often. If there is a change, you can see like this last one was reviewed with AUMA and the Alberta Utility Exchange Commission. So changes do sometimes happen in between the agreements. You can see though that the changes highlighted here, there isn't much of major significance. So if that kind of answers your question there, Councillor Chapman.
And if I may add, Councillor Chapman, there is a provision in the agreement that does allow for amendments from time to time if they were to come up, and both parties would just need to get together and discuss.
Any others? Councillor Holm?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wondering, are these agreements, are they tendered in any way when they come due, or is this something that is negotiated through AUMA or some other way? Because I don't, just wondering how that actually works. Just to make sure that other companies may have an opportunity to bid on supplying Coaldale with the net.
Yeah, the agreement is exclusive between ATCO and the municipalities that we serve. And if a municipality did decide that they wanted to explore other options, really the only option that exists is that they purchase the system from ATCO.
Okay, that answers that question then. So I think we're don't see anybody in the queue. So thank you, Kyle and Dan, for your presence. And then does council, anybody who want to sponsor first reading? Councillor Chapman sponsors first reading of the bylaw. Any discussion? I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's 7. So that's myself, Councillors Lloyd, Chapman, Holm, Simpson, and Avery, and Pauls. All in favor. Okay, thank you very much. Then we'll move to 6.2, borrowing bylaw, and that's Kyle then going to present on that.
Yeah, just scrolling here to my next page. Before I move on, just want to thank Dan from ATCO for showing up, and just Dan, I'll touch base with you tomorrow or whatnot.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thank you, Dan.
So for council's review tonight, we have the borrowing bylaw 803-B-02-21. This is for a line of credit for the town of Coaldale. So administration is seeking approval for a borrowing bylaw that provides the town of Coaldale access to a line of credit with BMO. Currently, the number requested is $4 million. This can be changed based on the discussion tonight as well. Currently, the town is in a healthy cash position and does not have any immediate need for access to a line of credit. There's two main purposes for such line of credit. First would be to allow the town to access funds in the event of emergency. Should something like this happen, a public or a natural disaster, the town wouldn't be able to access such funds if required without a bylaw being in place. This is why we find it prudent to have such a bylaw in place if the need ever does arise. Secondly, with administration looking into further details or abilities for properly investing excess funds in the town's reserves, sometimes those funds often need to be locked in for a certain period of time to obtain maximum returns. Having access to a line of credit would just allow the town to further explore additional investment options to ensure that the town always maintain proper cash flow. If such situation arised where there was, say, a time delay between funds that were locked in and accessing cash for, say, a capital project. Other considerations for this: the town currently has approximately $17.5 million locked in into a GIC, earning interest at 2.5%. This is compared to the current market rate, which is of 0.95%. It's just kind of an example of some of the strategies we undertake to ensure maximum returns on the investments. Having access to a line of credit would just ensure there was never an issue in the future where there was any cash flow problems. Potential interest rates on this line of credit, while this does change from time to time, the current rate I have been quoted is prime less 0.25%, which would equate to a rate of 2.2%. Under section 256(3) of the MGA, there's no advertising requirement for a borrowing bylaw that's less than 3 years. With this being a line of credit, there would always be a temporary borrowing bylaw. Just to confirm, this does not affect capital projects or operating projects. They still must be in the scope of council's approved budget. Again, this is just to protect the town against emergencies and allow us to do better investing as needed. I've also kind of looked at a few other municipalities to pull comparatives for council for other facilities that they have. So I pulled these numbers. They're not on the report, but I'll read them out loud. Note, these are all pre-pandemic needs. So again, as we can kind of see from COVID-19 and the tax deferral, utility deferral, it's possible that these municipalities have increased these limits as well. Crowsnest Pass was $2 million. Tabor was $3 million. High River was $4 million. Black Falls, which we compare into the comparative analysis, was $300,000. The city of Lethbridge pre-pandemic was 10 million, and post-pandemic it was 60 million. So some comparisons for council. And with that, I will turn it back to council for questions.
Okay, thank you, Kyle, for that. And I'll open the floor for questions of council. Okay, I'm not seeing any. And Councilor Chapman.
Quick question there, Mayor. Thank you so much, Kyle, for that presentation. Just a quick question on the line of credit. we don't pay any interest on it until it's enacted. Is that how that works?
Correct. There's no expense to the town until funds are utilized from it.
Just a final question. Do we have any other borrowing bylaws that are still floating in the background?
No, there's nothing else. Everything's been fully caught up, utilized.
Thank you, Councillor Chapman, and Councillor Avery has indicated he'd like to.
Thank you, Worship. Just for clarity, so with this line of credit that now allows and gives administration $4 million to invest for a longer period of time without it going to council. And so now that money can be used for capital projects while we invest the funding that we've set aside. Like, I just don't understand when we've got $17.5 million in investment, why we need $4 million line of credit that if we needed our 17.5 could pull out and just lose the interest. So I'm just a little bit confused of the purpose of getting a $4 million line of credit.
So the main purpose is to, for the town to have the ability in case of emergencies, but in referencing kind of to your question, for example, I'll answer your question with an example. So the funds held for the rec center are currently invested. They're in a locked-in rate. These GICs, again, they're often negotiated in multi-year terms, which we can best estimate our cash flow needs on a year-to-year basis and lock in our investments as we need and have the cash available to spend. But if there was a time where, you know, a GIC expired in or was redeemable in March, but we needed a, you know, large capital payment for, say, the rec center or another capital project that was like delayed by a month, say that payment was due in February and our GIC didn't come out to March, it would just allow us that wiggle room. So we didn't affect or negatively affect our possible investments. The line of credit wouldn't be used to necessarily invest anything on the long term. It may just be to help mitigate situations for cash flow issues for maybe a month if needed at a time.
And then Kyle, we don't have any GICs in our portfolio that are redeemable. I wouldn't imagine most of them are locked in for what a specific term, and most institutions wouldn't allow you to break that term. Is that right?
Yeah, like the current one we have the close to $18 million that will be redeemed in March. That was locked in at 2.5%, which I have reached out to the bank to see what things will be in the future. You know, to be frank, with the economy and the interest rate so low, that has had a large impact on the town's operating budgets and the income we utilize on our investments to fund capital investments or capital projects and future expenditures. Because of that, we're exploring more options available to us for the town to utilize the highest return on their investments. And sometimes that requires us locking in cash for a longer period of time. And just having the access to the line of credit, if there was a little bit of a period where we, you know, did need funds, but we couldn't access because they were locked in, it just helps ensure we're not missing out on any potential revenue to the town.
Thank you, Kyle. Any other questions? Councillor Holm?
So Kyle, then thank you, Your Worship. So Kyle, if I got this right, then we would only be using this for bridge kind of funding, just kind of to bridge from one until something else comes due, and then we can pay off the line of credit with the GIC or something that comes through. So it's strictly going to be used for kind of bridging us across.
You're exactly right. The town hasn't had the need to access a line of credit or any funds for a number of years. We're just trying to be prepared because things can change so quickly, as we saw with COVID-19. We don't want to be caught in a situation with our pants down. And you're correct, Councillor Holm, this would be strictly bridge funding as an example.
And then Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Worship. Just further to Councillor Holmes' question, then we wouldn't be able to use that funding to offset any deficit budgets that we could incur or happen to happen, right?
No, that wouldn't be applicable for this instance.
Okay, and then CEO Hastings wants to add a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to give you an example of something that happened in 2020, tax deferral date. June is typically the month where we receive the largest influx of tax revenue. When things like that got deferred till September, we did have to keep a very close eye on cash flow because you're still working on all your capital projects. You still have bills that are due. You still have expenses that come out. So having something like this in place, ideally, it's also good for unforeseen emergencies like pandemics. In our particular case, a lot of our capital projects weren't being tendered at that particular phase, so we are okay. But if the same thing happened in 2021, for instance, where you have a deferral like that, and you have a number of projects that are tendered out, and you're making progress payments on all of those projects, and you're not getting your big influx of revenue at June, having something like this would be helpful for bridging if you make concessions on payment schedules for taxes in the event of pandemic. So that's why a lot of places have these, and a lot of places increase the size of their line of credits in response to the past fiscal year due to COVID.
Thank you for that.
If I may also add, there's plenty of natural disaster examples in recent timeline within Alberta, whether it be fires, floods, and whatnot. And, hopefully Coaldale never sees something like that. Historically, when those disasters do occur, the town often does need access to cash quickly. And, in those instances, a lot of that stuff is helped out through disaster grants available from the province and the federal government. But if an event was like that to happen and the town needed quick access to cash, if the town did not have something like this, this is just protecting us in case something ever did happen.
Thank you, Kyle. Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Worship. I don't think using emergencies is a good example because I've been involved in probably most of the major emergencies and disasters that have happened in the province. And the province is pretty quick at making sure those municipalities were reimbursed for those funds to make sure that they weren't short to pay for the bills. So, to say it's because of an emergency just doesn't wait with me. Again, I've been part of them. I was in Slave Lake. I was in Fort McMurray. I was part of the flooding, part of the Coaldale fire. And I don't think it was ever discussed that the municipality was going to go bankrupt because the province was pretty good at making sure the funding was flowing.
Councillor Holm.
I get to my unmute, but thank you, Worship. I'd move that the town establish an operating line of credit of $4 million.
So is a borrowing bylaw, so you're supporting first reading of that then?
I am correct? Yes.
Thank you. So we have Councillor Holm that sponsored first reading of the borrowing bylaw that the administration has put together in the amount of $4 million. Any questions? I see none, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and then opposed? Okay, so there's Councillor Mayor Craig, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Holm, Councillor Simpson, and Councillor Paul's in favor, and then Councillor Avery is opposed. Lana, do you have?
Just a comment here that first reading is without comment or debate. You can do decline the vote on second and third reading, but not first. Per council procedural bylaw.
Okay. All right, so you're saying that we, for first reading, just passes without debate then, or?
That is correct, Mayor.
So do I have to recall the vote then, or?
Yes, if you would, please.
So with that in mind, Councillor Avery?
So why do we vote on first reading if there's no reason to vote? If you have to vote yes, you should just go straight to second reading, as my vote doesn't matter and second reading will be a no, the same as first. So why are we having a revote on first reading? If we know procedural bylaw says everybody has to be in favor, go to second reading.
CEO Hastings?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The most important part of first reading is that it gets carried, because that breathes life into the bylaw, which then allows subsequent debate, discussion, and amendments to take place. Although Lana is correct in terms of the wording of the existing procedural bylaw, which we'll deal with at a later part of the agenda. The most important part under the Municipal Government Act is that the bylaw is given life in the form of being approved. And then from there, depending on the bylaw, that's when there's either a public hearing or there's requests for amendments and additional discussion. So it's not the end of the world if it's not unanimous, but the important part is that first reading is passed so that the proper process from there can be followed.
So then, for clarity, we have 6-1, so then that would constitute passing the bylaw in first reading then, or? So we don't have to revote then, or?
Under the Act, you've met your minimum requirements for breathing life into the bylaw. Yes, that's correct.
Okay, all right. Okay, so the vote as recorded will stand with 6 in favor and Councillor Avery opposed then. And then does anybody want to sponsor second reading? Councillor Simpson sponsors second reading. And I'll call the question, all in favor? Okay, and so we have 6 in favor. Myself, Mayor Craig, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Holm, Councillor Simpson, and Councillor Pauls. And opposed is Councillor Avery is opposed. Okay, and then just for fun, we'll see if anybody wants to sponsor unanimous consent. Councillor Simpson makes a motion for unanimous consent. I'll call the question. All in favor of unanimous consent? And we have, okay, so we opposed. Okay, so we have Mayor Craig, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Simpson, and Councillor Pauls, all in favor. And Councillor Holm and Councillor Avery have voted as opposed to unanimous consent. So we won't have all 3 readings of that bylaw tonight then. Thank you very much. And we'll move on to the 6.3 cemetery bylaw. And we have Justin McPherson would speak to that. Okay, Justin, thank you. You can lead the discussion.
Good evening, Council. I'm here to present cemetery bylaw 798R0121. It's just an update to the current bylaw. We are bringing this to Council to modernize the town cemetery bylaw to reflect recent requests and changes due to the new rates and fees bylaw. This matter has appeared before Council previously. They asked to undertake a review of the cemetery bylaw and purchasing plot policies. So following review of the town cemetery bylaw, a number of changes are recommended. The specific changes and rationale outlined in the points that follow. So we removed all the rates and fees in the bylaw. Those are now referenced in the rates and fees bylaws. Kyle can maybe speak to that more. I believe you guys have spoken about this several times. Is that bylaw, we can bring one bylaw to Council instead of bringing all these separate ones. So the cemetery bylaw is joining that. We changed to allow burials on Sunday without special permission. This is a practice we were already doing. So there is a fee for holidays and Sundays, but it's something that we're already practicing for convenience of residents. We added a maximum number of cremated remains that are allowed to be buried with a casket. A couple of big changes. The couples section, we allowed reserve plots to be purchased before the death of a spouse, with the approval of the administrator, due to the passing of a close family member that is very close to the requested reserved plots. And then Schedule D, this is the area we spoke about quite a few times with the maximum height of headstones in the reserve section. After doing some research and a lot of discussion about this issue, we came to this recommendation that we allow a larger headstone in the reserve section with a surcharge. What we are recommending is a surcharge of $500 in the summer and $1,000 in the winter months. We have summer and winter months already in this bylaw, so we can apply those to this very easily. Those would be listed in that fees and rates bylaw that's coming up to council in the early spring, I believe. So we do have some time to discuss those rates. The only engagement we have is engagement with monument companies to update them on the changes. I've already spoken to them about these changes and got their input. So today we're asking for the council approve first, second, and unanimous consent to hold all 3 readings in the same meeting, followed by consideration of 3rd reading of the cemetery bylaw. Option 2, that council decline, and option 3 is council proceeds as they see fit. And I'm here to answer any questions.
Thank you, Justin. I'll open the floor to members of council if they want to have any questions. Councillor Home.
It's not really a question. I think it's just an amendment to the bylaw itself. We go to reserve section B, couples, and it's in line 38 or item 38. It talks in there about approval by the director. Director is not in any of the definitions. I think that should probably, the word there should be administrator, because we've used administrator in all other sections of the bylaw. So I think it's just a word change.
You are correct. That should be administrator.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Home. Councillor Chapman, do you have any question? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Your Worship, and thank you, Justin, for all your hard work on this. As a matter of fact, even today, we received a really nice thank you note on behalf of a resident in Coaldale who was really pleased with the direction that council took the last meeting. Speaking in favor of the proposed bylaw, one amendment I'd like to ask about is this, and that is about animals that come into the cemetery. I believe it's further down in the bylaw, but what it's saying is that all animals have to stay in the vehicle during an event. And what I'd like to see is that service dogs or service animals be allowed to accompany the person. I think there could be a human rights issue there, and I would just like to have that amended so that a service animal might stay with the person when they're at the cemetery.
Justin, do you have a response for that?
Thank you for that question, Councillor Chapman. As miscellaneous reads, it's under miscellaneous number 42. No person shall bring into the cemetery an animal other than a service animal, except if the animal remains in the vehicle. So that is already covering service animals.
Yes, I read that through, and I see what you're saying, but I'd like to see it where the service animal can stay with the person outside of the vehicle. I think that that's really, those animals are at work, and I don't want to get too far into this, but I think that it'd be helpful to have that, just a little bit of clarity there, so that those animals be referenced in a respectful way.
I believe that is how that is saying that. It's if the other than service animals, the animal has to be in the vehicle. So service animals are allowed in the cemetery with people.
Okay, and Councillor Chapman can scroll down to that to see if the wording is amenable to him. And then does any, with the mention of Councillor Holm, the bylaw, will we have pass the first reading as amended to change from director to administrator in that one instance then? Is that, we'd have to do it as amended, I guess. Councillor Holm?
I would move as amended.
So Councillor Holm moves first reading of the cemetery bylaw as amended. And is there any other discussion? I don't see any hands. So I'll call the question for first reading. All in favor? And opposed? So we have myself, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Holm, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Avery, and Councillor Pauls in favor. And Councillor Chapman indicates in voting in opposition. So then is there anybody that cares to sponsor? Councillor Holmes sponsor second reading? Okay. Okay, thank you, Councillor Holmes. And any discussion? Okay, Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Worship. When I spoke in favor at the beginning, it was mainly because I was hoping that we would get that a little more clarity into number 42, but it seems like this is the way the wording will remain.
That would be my understanding, is that administration feels that the service dogs are allowed to come outside of the vehicle and be at the cemetery site, the plot site during the service, and that already as it's worded. So
just your worship on that motion, then speaking to the motion, as long as that is understood, then I'll vote in favor of the next two motions.
Okay. All right, so then we have Councillor Holm that has a second reading motion on the table. So I'll call the question. All in favor? And we have 7 in favor, myself, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Holm, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Avery, and Councillor Pauls. And we can entertain the unanimous consent motion to begin with. Councillor Lloyd moves for unanimous consent motion, and I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's all 7 of us, as indicated by waving. So that's Mayor Craig, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Holm, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Avery, and Councillor Pauls are in favor. Then we can entertain third reading, and if somebody wishes. Councillor Pauls moves for sponsors third reading. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question on third reading as sponsored by Councillor Pauls. All in favor? Okay, and that's all 7 of us. So Mayor Craig, Councillor Lloyd, Chapman, Holm, Simpson, Avery, and Pauls. Thank you very much, Justin.
Thank you, Council.
And then we have the election bylaw, item 6.4. Lana, you can introduce that topic if you wish.
Thank you, Mayor. Members of Council, I'm presenting the election bylaw 801 GE 0221. This is a procedural bylaw for us to conduct the election, which is upcoming in October. The last election was held in 2017. It is a 4-year term. So the election bylaw that is presented will encompass for us to conduct the election using the electronic tabulators, as well as doing advanced voting, institutional voting, and now called electors assisted at home, which was formerly called incapacitated voting for those voters that were unable to make it to the polling station. There's a few updates in the presented bylaw, but for the most part, it's just a repeat. I did present on the last election as well if council wanted to consider anything regarding the nomination deposit. For populations less than $10,000, a municipality can charge up to $100 to accompany nomination papers. At the time of when they bring in their nomination, which is open from January 1st up until September 19th. If that is a consideration for council to add to the bylaw, it is not currently written into the bylaw. I included some examples as well from neighboring municipalities around the province of what they are charging. You will note that amounts higher than the $100 are obviously populations higher than 10,000. So that's why the increase, but otherwise you can see the various ones there listed. Some dates, nomination period again is from January 1st until September 20th. And then the actual nomination day is September 20th, which will be at the town office. Advance votes, potentially there are 4 right now, October 2nd, 5th, 9th, and 14th. And then of course, election day is October 18th. The official election results are published on October 22nd, and the deadline for filing any campaign disclosure statements is March 1st. There's already been approved budget for this item with the operating budget for 2021, but we've already found some cost savings, so it's projected potentially to come in $10,000 less already. So it's kind of exciting. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to address them.
I see Councillor Avery has a question.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Lana, for this. I'm just wondering if we're also preparing with our emergency management team an alternative method for voting if the COVID doesn't have any type of relief before that time.
Thank you, Councillor Avery. That's a great question. I have been polling my provincial clerks association around the province of what other municipalities have planned and are doing. Some are considering an outdoor vote. For the last election, we conducted it at the community center, which is an ideal location for us because it does have an indoor and an outdoor, like an out entrance, so that we could create like a flow coming in, going out, as well as potentially it has the large parking lot should, you know, COVID get worse and that becomes, you know, something that we have to consider. I do know that some municipalities are had plans to set up like tents, almost like a drive-through, like a car wash kind of thing, where you have a tent, you drive up, you would fill out your registration ballot, and then you would drive up to the next tent, and then you would complete your voting, and then the ballot clerk would be right there depositing it into the machine. Hopefully we don't have to get to that, but we still have the same technology in order to do that, should that be an issue. But I'm quite confident that the community center I'm hoping that we can do that just for the protection of the elements, but also knowing that we have an in entrance and an exit that could kind of create some flow. So it's definitely on my radar.
All right, thank you.
Lennon, there's been a lot of talk about the province putting a number of items on included in the municipal election and that. Do you have any sense if any of those questions are going to be asked of the municipality to monitor or record plebiscites or Senate seats and that kind of stuff?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. There is talk that there is a possible going to be a Senate vote and a referendum question. I am told that we might not possibly find that out until August. So I have consulted with the voting tabulator company, and there is going to be room on our ballot should that become an issue like for the election, so that we can include that as well.
So then if we're asked by the province to do those extra over and above the municipal election, do they compensate municipality for that, or do you know how that works?
I don't know how that works offhand, but I can find that out and report back.
Okay, just a curiosity. Any other questions? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Just same kind of question that Mayor was asking that came up at Mayors and Reeves on Friday. And they further to that, there was AUMA is inquiring of municipal affairs, a possibility for mail-in type ballots. And I'm not too sure I would really want to go down that road yet, but they're just inquiring what the logistics with it would be, especially with this COVID situation. And I think the other concern that some municipalities are having is with the question that there might be some issues with provincial referendum questions on the ballot, which kind of might skew a few things. But that was just only my 2 comments.
Okay. Are there any other comments, questions, or does anybody want to sponsor first reading of the election bylaw? Lana, go ahead.
I just wanted to address Councillor Chapman's comment about the mail-in ballot. It's formally called a special ballot, and it is a consideration for all municipalities to include that in our election and also in our resulting election bylaw. The special ballot is exactly that. So a person would have to acknowledge that that is something of interest to them. So for a particular reason that they cannot come to the election polls on election day to cast their ballot for reasons, maybe they work out of the country or out of the province, or if they're away. I did ask the question if it was an option because perhaps people have COVID or if they're sick or unwell to attend, and that is not, I was told that that is not a reason to have a special ballot. It's like, so I opted not to include that in the bylaw here. I did consult with medical services as well as our fire chief to see if we could find out like how many current cases of COVID are happening. And so because we're kind of, there was less than 18 at the time, I'm hoping that our numbers go down by then. So potentially, I didn't really think that part would be the issue. So I chose not to put it in the bylaw, but if that is something of council's interest, we can certainly explore that area. But there is a little bit more of time commitment towards, dependent on when we find out the referendum vote. So potentially say that could be the end of August. Nomination papers come in. And so then there's such a short timeline of when we get the actual close of nominations until like a month later when election is actually happening to get those mailed out to the people and then actually get them returned back in so that those votes get counted. It just seemed like a lot of extra work and worry rather than people having them come in and actually vote. So, but if it is a choice to council if you wanted to include that.
So the current bylaw as worded right now is without the deposit that you mentioned, is that right? So if people pass the bylaw as worded right now, it would be without the deposit. So we haven't had anybody discuss that. So I'm not sure if there's any interest in that. I'm not really supportive of the idea, but if anybody wants to speak to that, they can. Councillor Chapman and then Councillor Simpson. No, Councillor Simpson, go ahead.
I was just going to move for first reading of the bylaw.
Okay, Councillor Simpson moves sponsors first reading of the bylaw without the, as it's written, without a $100 deposit. So any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Okay, and that, is anybody opposed? Okay, I don't, so all 7 are in favor. Myself and Councillor Pauls, Councillor Avery, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Holm, Councillor Chapman, and Councillor Lloyd. So that's unanimous. Does anybody want to sponsor second reading? Councillor Pauls? All in favor? Okay, you're in favor, Councillor Lloyd? Okay, so we have all 7 of us in favor. Myself and Councillor Lloyd, Chapman, Holmes, Simpson, Avery, and Pauls. And does anybody want to entertain unanimous consent motion? Councillor Lloyd moves for unanimous consent. All in favor? Okay, that's all 7. Myself, Lloyd, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Holmes, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Avery, and Councillor Pauls. And anybody want to sponsor third reading then? Councillor Avery sponsors third reading. All in favor? And that's all 7 showing their affirmation. So Councillor Pauls, Councillor Avery, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Holm, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Lloyd, and Mayor Craig all in favor. So that's passed unanimously, with our thanks to Anna for putting all this together. And you did so well at that, then maybe, are you going to introduce 6.5, or is?
I don't see where my co-presenter went to, but if you, oh, we'll just pause one moment. Kaylin, did you want to take the lead on this, or do you want me to present?
Hi, Lana. Sorry, my computer did an automatic restart, so I had to dial in from my phone. So I'm assuming we're on the procedural bylaw.
Correct.
I can start things off if that's okay.
All right.
What we've attached here is a fairly comprehensive update to the council procedural bylaw 802 GE 02-21. I've outlined the categorical changes in the bullet points in the cover report, and attached to the document are both the changes that were tracked, that were largely the product of the town's legal counsel, who was asked to go through the bylaw with the directives that council provided to administration at the organizational meeting of council, and then further discussed at past council strategic planning seminars. And then there's also the clean version that shows how the bylaw flows from start to finish in the absence of the marked up changes. Given the breadth of the amendments, we don't necessarily need council to approve all 3 readings at this meeting. The biggest takeaway that we would request from today is where council's at with the progress, what's the feedback from council. Some of the main things that we instructed legal counsel to look at was to write it in plain language, make it easier to follow, update the terminology to reflect current events. This is a procedural bylaw that hasn't received an overhaul in a number of years. So at this stage, I'd like to just touch base with council and see, where we're at in the process, get a sense for quality control. Did it hit the mark? Is this what council had in mind when we were directed to conduct a modernization of this bylaw? And then start there, see where we're at before requesting council to get into the approval process for the readings. Did you want to add anything to that, Lana?
No, I think that's great.
Okay, I'll open the floor up to members of council if they have any comments, questions, or suggestions. Okay, it doesn't appear that anybody has any comments, or we've been talking about the procedural bylaw for quite a while now, so it's something that most people are aware of. Kaylin, do you want to add anything at all?
I don't think there's anything specific I need to add at this point, but just one, for instance, even in our council meeting today, can you vote verbally or can you put your hand up? This procedural bylaw answers that question. So it's just a number of very practical amendments to the procedural bylaw written in an easy to follow format. And one of the reasons that we were hoping to get this, it doesn't necessarily have to be approved today, but in the next couple of council meetings, is that a bylaw like this is an important factoid to add to a candidate nomination information package so that prospective candidates can see this is the current procedural bylaw of the municipality, And this, along with the council code of conduct bylaw, are two of the key ones that we would include in a nomination package. So that's the only timing element that I'll mention. But other than that, I don't have anything specific to say. I'm happy to have specific discussions with council based on the track changes that are attached, but I don't think there's anything specific that I feel is important to go through unless council wants to initiate that discussion.
And as Lana and Kaylin have indicated, that a lot of work done administratively based on input from council, and then that was also vetted by legal counsel as well. So it's been through quite a process already, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Does anybody want to sponsor first reading? Councillor Lloyd, do you have you want to sponsor first reading, or do you have a question?
I'll sponsor first reading.
Okay, we have Councillor Lloyd that has a motion on the floor to sponsor first reading. Any discussion? I don't see any discussion. I'll call the motion. All in favor of first reading? Okay, that's anybody opposed? I believe we had all 7 hands showing that they're affirmative. So Councillor Pauls, Avery, Simpson, Holm, Chapman, Lloyd, and Mayor Craig are all in favor of first reading. So that's unanimous. Does anybody want to sponsor second reading? Councillor Simpson? Any discussion? I don't see any. All in favor? Okay, and that's all 7. So Councillor Pauls, Avery, Simpson, Holm, Chapman, Lloyd, and Mayor Craig are voted in favor. So that's unanimous. We can entertain unanimous consent if anybody wants. Was that you, Councillor Chapman? Councillor Chapman moves unanimous consent. All in favor? Okay, and that's all 7. So Mayor Craig, Councillor Lloyd, Chapman, Holmes, Simpson, Avery, and Pauls are in favor, so that's unanimous. Anybody who wants to sponsor third reading? Councillor Pauls, I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's all 7 of us. So Mayor Craig, Councillor Lloyd, Chapman, Holmes, Simpson, Avery, and Pauls. And that's passed unanimously. That's good. And I think we are at a point where I think our delegation is on deck. We have Under Justin Sneed is joining the Zoom conference. Is that right, Lana?
Yes, Mary. Dr. Steed is on the call there. Yes, thank you.
Okay. Does anybody wish to introduce Dr. Steed to the members of council? Welcome, Dr. Steed, to the Zoom meeting. Okay, and Lana, was there a co-producer or Cam? You're gonna introduce the topic, and Dr. Steed, is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much, Mayor Craig. So Dr. Steed is a gentleman that both Spencer and myself, mute is off, good. Both Spencer and myself have had an opportunity to have a conversation with. Dr. Steed owns the property in town along Main Street that features the existing large mural for Wally's Pizza. And so we had an opportunity to engage with Dr. Steed. Now that we've done this large-scale revitalization of Main Street, and we have this beautiful new feature, and we chatted about, the possibility of what that might look like in the future and what some options for that might be, particularly with potentially the opportunity to look at something like a feature or a mural of some kind that might be an attractive addition to that downtown space. So Dr. Steed has provided council with a letter, which is part of your package, sort of introduces that topic. And we thought it'd be a good idea to maybe have a conversation as a group to see if there's any interest in pursuing something like that. And if so, what a reasonable framework for something like that might be. And then we can work out any necessary details from there.
Okay, that's great. So Dr. Sneed, did you want to say any words before I open the floor to council? And really appreciate you joining us tonight and showing interest in such a endeavor.
Sorry, Justin, you're on mute there.
Sorry, yes, my bad.
No problem.
I just wanted to thank council for letting me join your meeting tonight, and for the time that you're given for the consideration. I know from all that's going on in town and the COVID pandemic, I'm sure you're busy, and so I appreciate your time, and I appreciate Cam and representatives from council reaching out to me as well. I think, you know, everything that's going on in downtown, it's pretty remarkable, I think, for such a small town, and how well the revitalization project has gone. As a small business owner in town, it's really gone well as far as our business has gone. And so when Cam reached out to myself to review options to continue to provide a facelift to our downtown, I thought it was a great idea. And so I just wanted to touch base and see what what we could do to enhance. I mean, there is quite a prominent wall on the side of the building that I own, and so as Cam alluded to, the mural right now that is Wally's Pizza. I'm sure Wally's Pizza loves it, but I think we could maybe potentially use that space a little better to kind of mutually benefit the current business owners there, but also to enhance the downtown revitalization project. And so, as you kind of maybe have had a chance to look at in the letter, I love the idea, and we kind of discussed this with Cam as well, is using that opportunity to bring together maybe some local talent, some local artists, maybe some local idea creators on something that ties in the past of Coaldale with the vision for the future, and something that draws people to the downtown. I mean, that highway we know is a very busy corridor, and so something that that can catch people's eye, that maybe in a more visually aesthetic kind of pleasing way, that serves to enhance everything that's already been done. I mean, in some sense, if you're traveling along the highway, some of the wonderful things that have been done might not be as noticeable as that wall is, depending on the direction of your travel. And so I thought that maybe would be a neat opportunity to partner together. And so I just thought I'd reach out and see if there was maybe a partnership we could come together on to, you know, maybe financially make something like that happen. So.
Okay, well,
just curious if you have any questions or thoughts, or what opportunities that might arise there.
Does any member of council want to, Councillor Lloyd, do you have a question of Dr. Steve? You're on mute. There we go.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Dr. Steed, for this initiative. I think it's fantastic. Do you have any idea of costs, or have you done any research as to any artists that might be interested, and what that might entail?
Great question. We haven't done any kind of investigation into costs. I just wanted to touch base with council to see what kind of interest there was, and if so, what kind of involvement and what kind of decision-making council would want to be, you know, like, I guess, who would be making the decisions on what goes up on the wall, and with it, then who kind of would be paying for different aspects of that. And so if that was something that was somewhat appealing to council, then we would be looking at maybe some tenders and solicitations for different artists to put in bids and see what would, and then also to determine what kind of mural council might want, if that's something that a project council would want to be involved with.
Okay. And Councillor Lloyd, does that answer your question, or you have a follow-up question or comment?
Yes, I guess one of our main artists that has done our other murals is out of the country, but I suppose this technology probably could come up with a pretty good visual, online.
Right.
Barry Over, who's done other, I would suggest, getting some information, getting him to do a quote for sure.
And then Councillor Chapman, I think, had a comment or a question.
Thank you, Worship, and thank you, Dr. Steed, for joining us this evening to present your ideas for a mural, and thanks to Cam for touching base as well and connecting the dots there. Going back a while, we had a mural committee in Coaldale back in maybe last 15 years ago, and so that committee was really worked hard on striking out and getting some ideas for downtown. We were successful in getting the mural on the Greer building, and then also on the fire hall. And so both those murals were conducted by local artists, two separate people. However, both passionate about Coaldale and its history. And so the committee was involved with idealizing what could go on there and some of those concepts, and then working together with the artist to put that together. So our committee had looked at that wall as well. We looked at a couple other walls, but we know that this one was probably the one that we had a lot of interest in for a lot of reasons. And so I have a strong feeling of what I know it would cost. I'm not going to say out loud because maybe those numbers have changed, but nonetheless, it is a lot. There's a lot of wall there. And you would certainly need to do it right for a mural to have some life and longevity to it. And so I would be very, very interested in hearing some thoughts about what kind of concepts. I know that our mural committee had talked about the past, present, and the future, some of the historical things that were involved with our community and how it brought people here to Coaldale and bringing that history into the picture. But I guess with everything, there's a cost and how much detail goes into a mural, how large of a mural, what kind of the background. There's lots of mural ideas around Alberta, in BC, and elsewhere where they have conceptualized, but also really put together some good value into the community. And this is one of the things that will really bring a lot of value into Coaldale.
Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just some suggestion for fundraising, possibly. I'm sure the community would really go behind this, and if you could do plaques or something like that, and get the whole community involved, I'm sure you could cover the costs.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Dr. Steed, for bringing this forward. I think this is a great thing. I would love to see it tendered and see how many prices. I like the idea of the past, present, and future too on it, and something eye-catching to definitely draw people in. I think that wall has, I think it'll be a much appreciative update. So I really hope this goes well. And I guess maybe from Cam and Spencer, what do you guys want to do moving forward? Like, there'll be so much administration time. So do you want to set up something, and then where would you guys see this working and going in the future?
Sure. Through the chair to Councillor Simpson, I guess first order of business, I'll just make sure everyone can hear me. Okay, excellent. Never quite sure in virtual meetings, so I always like to check. What I might suggest one option could be is to hit the sweet spot in terms of administrative time and the goal as we're discussing it and putting some life into it, it might be a reasonable approach to put together a document that represents a design competition framework that would then make up the body of something that we might typically refer to as an RFP, put that out for response, and then see what kind of feedback we get from anyone who may wish to provide a proposal. I would probably suggest that there be a strong element within a document like that that highlights the visual component and using Dr. Steed's idea of visiting the past, present, and future in terms of what the mural might represent. Probably would get a variety or a broader variety of ideas versus trying to really get specific with scope right away. So if there's a desire to see what the thoughts are and looking at local preference as one of the opportunities to highlight local artists or local ideas in that process, that might be a reasonable way to go. So really the work would be on the front end between administration and Dr. Steed, coming up with that tender document and then releasing it out into the wild and seeing what comes back.
Okay. Dr. Steed, do you want to add on to that at all, or are you?
I forgot to acknowledge, I did not thank Spencer as well. So I did meet with Spencer and Cam, and so I wanted to thank Spencer as well for everything he's done. No, this is great, and I love the ideas, everything from the desire to have it and the ideas for fundraising. I think we all agree that the wall could be used in a much more beneficial way for the town, and so I think to move forward, I like what Spencer's put forward as a starting point, and then we could maybe reconvene when we have a better idea. And sorry, I don't know all the councillors' names again, but the gentleman that mentioned, just so we can get an updated idea of what costs are going to be. Things may have changed, like you said, since the last time the mural committee had met. So that way, I think we'd be in a better position to kind of have an educated session with council, so that you have actually something to grab a hold of and say, yes, this is something we want to do or not. But I just wanted to kind of tease this out a bit and see if interest was there to even start this process, I guess, with council. So.
Councillor Holm?
Thank you, Your Worship. I totally agree. I think this is a great opportunity for us. I don't want us to rush it. I want to make sure that we get it right, because something like this, you really want to have it as something that is a showcase. I'm just wondering if the same group, Dr. Steed, yourself, and Cam and Spencer, whether you've sat down at all with possibly the museum board to get any of their thoughts or ideas, because they kind of have a lot of the history and background of stuff, and some of the people that previously were on that board. So I'm just hoping that that type of group is also included in this.
I can't speak for Spencer or Cam. I personally have not yet met with the museum board, but I think that's a fantastic idea. I love it.
Yeah, just to speak to that, thank you. Yeah, certainly at a point in this process, that would definitely be something we need to do. So at this point, just as an initial step, we thought it was appropriate to maybe gauge interest at the council level for this type of project. It seems like the interest is there. As we discussed at the last council meeting, the staff time component right now is a little bit tight. So it's not something that we want to sort of run too far down a path and then arrive at a point and learn that there isn't interest. So certainly consultation with the museum group makes sense. Spencer and I can put a document together sort of outlining the base requirements, and that can be used to come back and get us a clearer sense in terms of what kind of price we're talking about and all the rest of it. Probably with an understanding that that's not coming in sort of the immediate next few weeks. But that being said, yeah, certainly something we can put together, and then we should have something more concrete to come back and present to council and the broader community at a later date.
Okay, great. Yeah, well, on behalf of council, certainly, Dr. Steve, we're elated that you're willing to offer up that wonderful canvas for something that could be very positive for the community, and it's nice to see that you have pride of ownership and offering that up to remedy maybe a bit of an eyesore with all due respect to the current business, it's good that they can advertise and that, but I'm sure even them, they would have preferred to have, some upgrades to the wall over time as well. So I think this will achieve a number of elements if we can move forward. Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Your Worship. I think you said everything I was going to say as well.
Great. So then maybe would it be just a simple motion to direct the administration to come back with some more fulsome report in an upcoming council meeting that we're support the idea and principle? Cam, okay. So Councillor Chapman, I think you're willing to move direct administration, whereas council's in support of a mural project in principle, and we're directing the administration to work closely with Dr. Steed and coming up with more detail at the upcoming council meeting. Is that right, Councillor Chapman? You have that, Lana?
Yes, Mayor, thank you.
Okay, good. All right. So then we have that motion by Councillor Chapman on the floor. Is there any discussion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's unanimous. Mayor Craig, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Hone, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Avery, and Councillor Falls. So you have a solid endorsement, Dr. Steed, and I know that Cam and Spencer just wanted to dive into one more project. So they're very happy about that as well. So they love work. So thank you very much for your time, Dr. Steed.
Thank you as well. I appreciate your time, Council and Mayor. So
thank you. Okay. I think that covers that business, and then we can move into new business 7.1. And we have Justin, and we'll thank you again, Dr. Steed, and you can go about your evening. I'm sure you have something better to do than sit on a Zoom meeting with us. So enjoy your evening.
perfect. Thank you very much. Have a great night.
Hey, Justin.
Thank you, Mayor Craig. I'm here to update the current snow removal policy to include additional roads, minor snow road priority changes, process changes, and adjust to town growth. The updated maps and locations are also provided here. The last time this was taken to council was in 2017. Unfortunately, there was no resolution from council during that meeting. This policy is essentially the same as that policy that was taken in 2017, so this council has already seen it. We are currently operating under the 2011 council resolution, so I'm looking essentially for a resolution so this policy is enacted properly. There has been several updates to the snow removal policy since this came to council in 2011. Of course, we've done the annexation and quite a few different changes. So we've included public communication. We've updated 3 sections of the road to priority 1, extended the industrial roadways to better match the growth of the industrial area, and included the annex roadways that were from the county of Lethbridge. All maps have been updated to reflect the new proper boundaries. And I'm here to answer any questions. So I'm looking for council to approve MSOD 003 snow plowing and snow removal sanding policy.
Thank you, Justin. Before I open it up, then I just asked, was there consultation with the 2 school boards, the schools in Coaldale about the snow routes for school buses and that at the same time?
I didn't have any consultation with them this time on the update. I would have to look back in 2017 to see if previous administration did talk to them. As far as I know, we haven't had any issues. Schools are on our priority 1 list, so I don't believe there's any. I haven't heard of any issues in the past couple of years. So,
okay, council, the floor is open if anybody wants. Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you so much, Your Worship. And Justin, I really like your your snow plowing sanding policy. Just a couple of questions here regarding some of the streets that you are proposing, even for on your priority list. And I just noticed that 30th Avenue South, 30th Avenue at the south end, and of course 17th Street south of the canal isn't marked on there for any priority at all. And I'm just wondering if there was something that you will be addressing to that effect for that area.
I believe that's the annex roads that you're discussing, Councillor Chavin.
17th Street is straight past the egg farm, going south to 30th Avenue, and then 30th Avenue from 845 to the quads, and whether that was going to be part of your snow policy.
So they are plowed regularly. They're part of our, essentially our Route 1s because they're plowable roads. There's a difference between kind of snow removal and snow plowing. Snow plowing, we're able to push the snow to either side of the road, so it's relatively quick for our snow plow to go up and down those streets and push snow into the ditches. The priority basis we have here are actually the snow removal bases. So what happens is, as the plow goes around town, and now that we have the new 3-in-1 plow, this enables us to sand and plow any roads that may need plowing at the time. So as you'll see the sander going around, you'll see him drop the plow on those in those locations.
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you so much. My other question about the snow fence, and I believe that there have been issues in the past, especially along past the Land O'Lakes. They're going towards Cottonwood, and in times past, they put up snow fence, but being that it's on private property, that would be up to the property owner to maintain or to install that.
In the past, we have worked with Land O'Lakes to put up snow fence. It depends on the year and how much time is allowed for us to put up snow fence. This year, I would have to double check our maps, and I would have to look into that for you. However, it's something we can talk to them about more regularly.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Lloyd?
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wondering, Justin, how the business community is taking to all the changes with the upgrades on Main Street. Are you in communication with them regarding snow removal? Are they all okay with what's happening?
So far, everyone I've talked to has been okay with it. Unfortunately, our pilot project this year has worked well the time that it snowed. Fortunately, we haven't had much snow this year to actually test it out. So as part of the policy and what we've created on Main Street, which will be added to this policy or another one in the future, anything above 4 inches is considered that snow event, and that's when we go out and our crews remove that snow on Main Street. The snow events we have had have been very successful. It's actually been quite nice to remove that snow off the sidewalk so it doesn't end up in the curb and gutter the next day. So it's worked well so far, and we've heard good feedback.
Councillor Holm?
Thank you, Worship. Just referencing the map that we have there, Justin, I just noticed that we have a back alley that we've actually show as being a priority 5 list at the back end of Jenny Emery on 12th Street and would it be about 23rd Avenue? Is that something that we want to have as a policy that we actually, because it actually pushes people to use the back alley across from 23rd Avenue straight through and around Jenny Emery, around the south end of Jenny Emery and areas like that. And I know that we've had some issues with some of the residents around there complaining about all the vehicle traffic. And I'm just wondering if that is actually what we do or not.
We remove snow in that alley when it's required due to drainage issues. It's something I could look into deeper, Councillor Holm. I haven't looked into that one specifically for quite a while now. And as far as I know, we actually haven't touched that alley this year. Usually in the large snow events that cascade over time, we do the drainage streets, and that's the blue streets in the spring to allow drainage to flow properly. So that's when we would do that alley, and that's what fifth priority is. So, but I will take a closer look at that.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Any additional questions? Well, thank you very much for all the work that you put into it, Justin. Councillor Lloyd, do you want to ask another question?
No, just wanted to make a motion, your worship. Is that in order right now?
Yep.
Okay, I'll make a motion. We'll go with option 1. We approve the snow removal standing policy and sanding policy.
Okay, great. We have a motion by Councillor Lloyd. Any discussion? I see none. All in favor? Okay, and that's I see all 7 hands go up. It's from what I can see on my screen. So myself, Councillor Avery, Councillor Pauls, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Holm, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Lloyd are in favor, and there's nobody opposed. Thank you very much, Justin.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
And then we have item 7.2, Old Man Watershed Council. The 2021 donation. Kyle is here to address that.
Yeah, so attached in the staff report is the 2021 donation request from the Old Man Watershed Council. The total ask for this year is $4,085 at a rate of 47 cents per resident. For comparison purposes, 2020 and 2019 were both held at just under $2,500 at a rate of 30 cents per resident. So we're bringing this forward to council to consider if this, with this being a donation request, if this is something that they would like to continue for 2021 or not.
Hey, council, do you have any thoughts on it? The Watershed Council does a lot of work in the watershed. I know that, and they have a different structure for participating on the council and that. So members of our council don't generally get a chance to be represented there. So it's hard to have insider knowledge that way on the inner workings of the Watershed Council, but I'm fairly confident that they do fairly good work for the watershed, and with Coaldale being a benefactor. But maybe Councillor Holm has other thoughts, or Councillor Holm?
Thank you, Your Worship. I really don't on this one. I'm just wondering, was there any justification that they gave for such a huge increase from 30 cents per capita up to 47? Like, that's whatever, about a 40% increase. And I'm just wondering if they had some special projects or special reasoning for it.
In the letter from them, there is no specific mention. It does say your donation is critical to the OWC to continue to maintain our watershed health, and that directly impacts every resident in our watershed. So there is nothing specifically that dictates that. Just from offhand, you know, if there's other municipalities that say opt out, that obviously does require the rest of the municipalities to bear the burden. That would probably be my suspect, without knowing for sure.
Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you, Worship. I've put a little bit of thought into this, and it's quite interesting because a year ago they would have been, you know, lower than most requests from other boards and committees, or including South Grow and some of the others, Highway 3. The Chinook Library Board, I see that they've dropped their rate 5%. Highway 3 has dropped theirs from 50 cents down to 35 this year. Just in light of all the things going on, I think there have been some savings that we're able to pass through that didn't justify a full per capita fee. So I think some of the boards that I've been hearing from have taken that into consideration. And so I did hear Shannon Frank speak on Friday, but nonetheless, it wasn't a full broad stroke of what the work they're all doing and whether there was expanded version of their work with regards to their service in the Southwest. So I don't know whether if we can offer a number, Kyle, or do we either it's all or nothing?
Definitely, it is a donation request. I have seen other municipalities, their council, that have elected to just go with a straight dollar amount other than what is on the request. So definitely, as council, you do have the ability to, essentially agree from the request or anywhere down to zero. So it's kind of up to council for that dollar amount.
Councillor Chapman?
Just waiting for any other discussion on this matter.
Okay. So maybe it's not really a time sensitive thing. We could just send a letter saying that we discussed it tonight, and one of the questions outstanding was, maybe a little bit of a request for a rationale on to why they're asking for such an increase, and that we can consider at another meeting. Councillor Hall?
I would certainly support making the motion that way, that we ask for additional information from the Watershed Council.
Okay, we have a motion by Councillor Home to direct a letter be sent to Old Man Watershed Council to ask for further clarification on the rationale for the per capita increase year over year. Any discussion? I see none. I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's all 7 of us. So myself, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Holm, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Pauls, and Councillor Avery are all in favor. Okay, thank you, Kyle. And then we have 7.3 is the Russ Tanner recreation rates and fees increase report. Welcome, Russ.
Hey, thank you, Your Worship, and hi, Council. So in front of you is the 2021 rates and fees. The following reports request the guidance of the Council for the implementation of the 2021 rates and fees. Due to the current economic situation brought on by COVID-19, administration is asking Council to consider foregoing the increase for 1 year. A little bit of background is that for the recent history, there's been a 5% increase yearly. The last survey of similar communities' rates and fees was completed in 2019, and it showed that we were certainly within range on most and all of those rates and fees. So administration plans to do a comprehensive survey in 2021 prior to making recommendations for the 2022 recreation rates and fees. I should include that this includes the community center, the hub, the Gem of the West Museum, picnic shelters, quads, swimming pool, and the ice arena. Administration's just basically considering the negative financial impact that COVID-19 may have, has had some discussion and some concern by some of the local user groups that use these facilities on a regular basis, that would anticipate that their numbers may be down. And so they're looking at every opportunity to kind of keep their registration up. From a microeconomics perspective, the more registration they have, the more rentals we'll get for the most part. From a financial impact, Kyle has confirmed for me that The budget for the 2021 year was based on 2020's rates. However, it also looked at a 20% capacity reduction in rentals. It's likely that we'll be beyond that now, seeing what 2021's impact will be. In some situations, we've had some situations where we are working with a few community groups, AHS with the immunization clinics, things like that, that actually might see a good bounce back there. But there could very well be a financial impact when you consider that the biggest income on the recreation rates and fees is from a rental basis and is certainly attached to the success of our local user groups. So council has in front of them some options. Two basic options is that council passes, the first option being the council passes 0% increase for the 2021 recreation rates and fees, and or that we go status quo and for 2021 recreation rates and fees increase by 5%. Do you have any questions?
Councilor, is there any questions? Councilor Simpson?
Thank you, Your Worship. So I do have a question. So you stated our budget has the 2020 rates and a 20% deduction in the use, but you think we're going to be more than 20%?
Yeah, I mean, at this point of this time of the year and just kind of looking at what our facilities may or not be used for through the year, the 20%, we're going to really try hard as administration to try to seek out rental agreements and things with user groups. I think that back when we were budgeting in October and November, I could be wrong, I won't speak for you, but we may have had a little bit more optimism about how quick in 2021 we could be out of this. So yeah.
If you had to guess, what would the percentage be then now, if you had to take a wild guess for 2021?
Yeah, just like anything, it's predictions, but certainly in conversation with Kyle and things, we've, well, all of January's basic rent is all gone. And it depends on this immunization program and how quick it gets back up. Saturday, we had a little bit of an excitement and weren't expecting, but kind of even had more restrictions lifted, which surprised us. But the reality is we're 3 weeks away from the next lift. So again, it's a projection, but I think that we'll be working on trying to make that 20%, but we'd be under, you know, I'd like to inform council that that's probably looking around 25, 30%.
Okay, Councilor Simpson?
Thank you, Worship. So then I have a question for Kyle, if he's there. What does this impact do to the budget if we keep it at 0% and keep it at the projections that we may change to be a higher projection?
Okay, sorry, can you clarify that again? What does it affect on the budget if we?
So with the change, so let's say we keep it at 0% like we predicted, or that we put in our budget, but 20%, but now it's more than 20%. What will that do to our budget? Like how much of a shortfall are we looking at now?
It's hard to know without the exact dollar amounts. But if I'm just, okay, I'm just looking at the report here. So if I just do some quick math in my head, like on average for the arena in a year, we'll have 165,000, pool 65,000, other user fees. You know, we're probably roughly between 300 and 350 grand in revenue. So you could almost consider a 1% additional 1% reduction is, you know, $300 to $3,500 in lost revenue. Part of the offset about that is, you know, with the arena being essentially closed since the beginning of the year and you know, who knows if it's going to reopen, we have made some reduction in expenses with part-time casual staff that we have been able to save money there from reduced hours. So while you were going to be probably lower on the revenue side, we're trying to, you know, keep some expenses as minimal as we can to offset that. But again, if you look at, say, between $300 and $3,500 for every 1%, that would probably be a good close estimate.
Okay. Any other questions? I think in absence of anything more concrete, the staying with the 2020 rates is probably the most likely thing to. I hate to keep stepping up our increases when people are having trouble. Councillor Home?
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I'm in agreement with that, and I'm in agreement because I think we're going to see, and I hope I'm wrong, but I think we're going to see that because a lot of sports have taken almost a whole year off, that a lot of our users may have found something else to do. And by increasing the fees on top of trying to get people back using the facilities and enjoying the facilities, it may be kind of a double whammy. At first, we're trying to get them back, and now we increase the fees on them. How are we going to get them back if we increase the fees? So I'm going to speak in favor of a 0% increase and cross my fingers that budget-wise we can cover that as we move forward.
I think Councillor Lloyd, did you have anything to say?
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I was just going to make a motion, but I think Roger just did that.
Well, he was in support. I don't know if
Okay, well, I'll make the motion then. I'll make the motion that we go with option 1 with a 0% increase.
Okay, any further discussion? I don't see any. Call the question, all in favor? Okay, that's a unanimous, and myself, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Home, Councillor Pauls, Councillor Simpson, and Councillor Avery are all in favor and nobody opposed. Thank you, Russ. And then we have Spencer on item 7.4, the wayfinding pilot draft participation plan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm actually going to turn it over to Melanie to present this evening, if that's all right.
Thanks, Spencer. So good evening, everyone. The following report is to present council with a draft public participation plan dedicated to gaining feedback on the town's wayfinding pilot signage. To provide an update, the pilot signage installation operations completed the installation of the pathway signage in December of 2020, and recently the Main Street business inventory in January of 2021. As of now, there is a live online survey for residents to provide feedback on the signage. However, due to a low response rate, 12 individual responses to be specific, staff is presenting a variety of options to allow residents and stakeholders to provide feedback on the current signage. The proposed engagements will consist of 2 focus groups, including a Main Street business owner focus group and an accessibility focus group. It was decided that these were the 2 best groups that are to comment on the unique features of each type of signage. The Main Street business owners will be asked how useful the business inventory is and if there are any potential areas of improvement, while the accessibility focus group will be asked whether there are additional accessibility improvements that can be incorporated into future permanent signage. In order to gain feedback from the general public, staff would like to take the approach of a user intercept survey, as it would be the most effective way to engage users on the pathways. This will involve the presence of staff and volunteers on the pathway to administer a digital survey and to gauge their perceptions. It's important to note that from the responses received on the current survey, the reaction from the community has been mainly positive. An example of some of the responses received included directional information and informational signage was useful, simple and easy to read. One respondent appreciated the map that was included, while another described it improved their running times by having listed distances. Lastly, the opportunity for residents to provide feedback extends beyond the signage. Survey questions will be designed to better understand the routes that are currently being taken by residents. And by gaining useful feedback, we can determine where future trails and pathways can be located in the future. So if anyone has any questions.
Are there any questions through there, Melanie? Councillor Chapman?
Yeah, thank you so much, Your Worship. Melanie and Spencer, great job on taking this forward. It's really starting to show. I had a resident in Coaldale who had a business downtown and was missed on the signage, and then it was quickly rectified. And he thanks you profusely for fixing that for him. That was really great. And so my question is just the current signage that you're using now, is that just sort of like prototype? You'll be looking at doing something different later on?
Thank you for your question, Councillor. This is a pilot phase right now. The intention is to go for a more permanent signage type in the future, but it is dependent on what the feedback is. So if people are content with how the signage looks right now, we can definitely add to it different locations or adapt them quickly, but it's really up to what we hear. But in the meantime, while we're gathering feedback, we will be putting together research for permanent signage.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? So I'd be supportive of letting them go ahead with their engagement policy as presented. If anybody care to make a motion? Councillor Pauls moves option number 1, is that right? Okay, Councillor Pauls moves option number 1. Is there any discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, that's 7 in favor. Councillor Avery, Councillor Pauls, Simpson, Holm, Chapman, Lloyd, and myself. So that's carried unanimously. Thank you, Melanie and Spencer.
Thank you, Council.
And we're giving Russ the floor now for the Coaldale Arena Ice Removal Plan 2021.
Thank you, Your Worship. And so I think we're going to have a difficult time making everybody happy on this one. I'll say that first. However, I want to provide council with the pertinent information to make an informed decision here. And so some things that I'll go through here will first be an update on local ice user discussions. I've continued to have conversation with them throughout the last week and a half. And on many of these points, just so you're aware, I'll update you because it's been a moving target. It has actually changed since the report was made slightly. I'll also be talking about the peer comparisons in the report for the 2021 ice seal removal of what other people are doing around us. And then also I'll talk a little bit about the arena pad and dasher board project that we have on the off season because it's in a pretty tight timeline and it plays into some of the factors here as people are looking for to make decisions around us as well. So first of all, as an introduction, like I mentioned, I've met with Coaldale Minor Hockey, Coaldale Figure Skating, and the Copperheads concerning the remaining of the ice season. It's fair to say at this point in time, I'm confident in making the statement that for each one of these associations, the 2021-2022 season is of more importance than what the rest of this season may look like, that they've made that very clear. The background a little bit here, the arena has been closed since December 12th of last year. We shaved the ice down and raised the temperature on the ice to allow the ice plant to come on as little as possible. And we did also lay off the seasonal staff at that time. We've been keeping the full-time staff working on a number of other projects, just to kind of give you a little bit of that background. We won't be in the arena for the off-season maintenance programs that normally would happen. And so we've gotten ahead on a bunch of those and working with some user groups on some of their space and clutter and improvements. So analysis of current information. So I reached out. So the South Alberta Rec Association provided some information about the communities that are in the South Zone. There are also a number of other communities that in email had asked me what we were doing. So in turn, I asked them the same thing. Since then, the Alberta's Association of Recreation Facility Personnel has also put out a call where a number of other people have responded, and that's actually happened since this report was built. So I can say pretty confidently that although I do want to correct one thing just in case people hear otherwise, my understanding is that Raymond did turn off their ice plant, but had actually caught and turned it back on when the regulations changed somewhat. And so their ice is not out as of yet, but they're contemplating the same things we all are. It is confident in saying that from what I'm seeing in the past few days and past week, that number of 30% of ice being pulled around the province is probably actually a little bit higher than that. The people that have kept the ice in up to this point in conversations, in many cases are entertaining the extension of this season. So many people are in a situation to be able to extend. However, I want to bring up at this point in time that that's a factor that we aren't able to entertain because of that construction project. If we were to push that back, the 2021-2022 season would be in jeopardy because of the tight timeline that exists right now. So in discussion with user groups last week, we talked about a drop dead date, and they had all agreed upon February 15th. I can confirm that minor hockey does not have plans to start back up an operation or a program to the end of the year, and neither does figure skating. The Copperheads are kind of in limbo, but sounds like likely will be in the same boat, considering that they're 3 weeks away as well before anything. And in that case, we wouldn't really have an ice season for them with the construction project. So that's kind of the situation we're in now. I do want to mention, though, that there has been conversation. There are other people in the community that provide instructional activities. They're pretty happy about the fact that they're able to do that at this time, one-on-one, and actually with up to 10 participants on the ice now based upon Saturday's update. And we actually have we have almost 40 bookings planned for this week as we speak. So to give you some information. So anyhow, to make a long story short and to kind of tie everything in, there's been ongoing communication. Programs are not looking to start back up. We're dealing with the regular instructional bookings right now. We've allowed those to happen at $75 an hour, which if you remember back in December, there was an email that went out to get that approved, the opportunity to be able to lower that cost when it was, especially one-on-one instructional situations. The other rates would have been astronomical. So what we're looking at here in options as we move forward is that there's an opportunity in option one that council directs staff to continue with status quo and hold off on the ice until the end of the season. We could go till the end of March and plan the construction project as currently planned. Or option two is that the council directs staff to remove the ice immediately. That would be tomorrow. I can tell you at this point in time, like I mentioned, right through Sunday this week, we have 36 bookings, and they were counting through today. I estimate that we'll probably have 40 booking slots before the end of the day tomorrow. And I can tell you a little bit of a financial impact on that after as well. The council hold off on the ice for another week, then proceed with the following. And that's based upon the February 15th drop dead date. What I'd like to entertain here, and understanding that things have changed slightly in the last even 3 days with Saturday, is that I've reached out to our general contractor on the project that will happen. It's not likely that we would see mobilization on the construction project within 2 weeks. And we're in all likelihood looking at the possibility of 3 weeks. One of the first things they'll do is they're waiting for us to get the ice out, and then they're coring and doing soil samples and things that need to go away so that we know where we need to take that materials and if we need to take it to special remediation points. So with that information in mind, I'd like to look at that February 15th date, understanding that we're coming up on Family Week, understanding that we currently have the staff in place to be able to accommodate even more than 40 bookings in a week. And I'd like to suggest that date, the council actually entertain that option number 3 with the date of the 22nd of February rather than the 15th of February and or March the 1st. So I'd like to entertain that in option 3 if you'll engage in that. And that's kind of where I'm at. Is my option is I right now at this point in time, staffing and utilities are the biggest cost to the arena. And on a regular year, as you guys are aware, that's a community service opening an arena, that there is we don't recover all of our costs ever. The cost recovery really is somewhere around 50 to 70%, depending on the facility. In a regular year, we're looking at a daily cost recovery of around minus $294.25 a day. Right now, with what's going on and only 40 bookings, again being limited to the one-on-one and or up to 10 hockey teams not practicing, we're just over $100 more a day in cost recovery to that. So we're looking at $399.97 as the estimated expense to the town per day to continue operating this week. That will improve if we get more bookings during the Family Week, which I would suggest we should. There is another factor that comes into play that I should have mentioned earlier too, is we're seeing a lot of demand and inquiry right now because the city of Lethbridge has chosen to keep their facilities closed right now under the current restrictions. I'm told, though, that they are re-entertaining that with the restrictions going from one-on-one to 10 people on the ice with an instructor. And I don't know what their answer is going to be, but that could affect us as well. And in large part is the reason why I'm suggesting that as we go further into March, where our impact to the community and to the amount of kids probably starts to diminish a little more and a little more. There may be other options. But I'll stop talking for a minute and see if you guys have any questions. I know this is a good topic. So.
Any questions of council? Go ahead, Roger.
Thank you, Worship. And thanks, Russ, for bringing all this forward. The first question I was going to have is, of these 40 bookings, what percentage are actually Coaldale typical ice users? I'm going to throw that out there only because if we're losing $400 a day, even if we have these 40 groups that have already applied, if half or 3/4 of them are from Lethbridge and Picture Butte and Raymond and other areas that have already closed their facilities, that would mean then that the taxpayer Coaldale is supplementing other citizens to use our facilities. And I'm not really sure I'm in favor of that. So that was my first one. What was the second question I was going to have? The second one was, with the restrictions of 10 people on the ice at a time. I've got kids and grandkids, of course, that are using or wanting to use facilities and stuff, and that's one of their biggest concerns. Every hockey team out there has more than 10 kids. So who are we going to have police that they only have 10 people, so the town of Coaldale doesn't get a bunch of tickets for contravening the Health and Safety Act? So I really have concerns with how we're going to actually manage these, because I really don't want our staff to be put in a position to have to count noses out on the ice each time and make sure that they're wearing masks when they're sitting on the bench, because that's part of the protocols. And when they're on the ice, they can take their masks off. And it just seems to me like we could put our staff in a situation that we really don't want them to be in. So I'm leaning towards the favor of shutting down now. Russ, get that facility up and running for next fall as quickly as we can, and without having to put the contractor and the town at risk for next fall's opening of the new facility.
Okay. Yeah, no, really good, both really good questions. And I appreciate that even, you know, especially the one question you're thinking about staff and that certainly was weighing on my mind, especially over the weekend when all of a sudden Saturday morning things changed. And so that was a lot of fun. But I'll answer your first question. Who's using the facility? I can tell you right now that the vast majority of the bookings for this week were from Coaldale. We do have a few individuals here that actually book the ice and have gotten together. And actually, I guess I should quantify that is I know that the people that are initiating it are certainly from Coaldale. I can't tell you for sure who the participants are, but I can tell you that the people that are initiating it are the people that are involved with figure skating and hockey here. Wade Kleppenstein is one of the people that have been in contact with me on a regular basis and is really doing a bunch of bookings. So that first one, the vast majority at this point in time. However, there are some that have called and inquired, and I'm sure would have filled up some of the gaps that existed a few days ago from outside of Coaldale. And then the second question, the maximum 10. One of the things that we kind of got ahead of immediately today is that they need to call Community Services Caitlin to actually book this facility and the facilities, and she's in each one of these days. And so we're making sure that quality is going through her and she's expressing. One of the things that are out there that is helping this is upfront letting them know that this actually wasn't just open to any 10 people. This is actually only in the section where it's schools and youth activities. The participants within the programs have to be under the age of 18. And it's a maximum of 10 with the instructors and participants. And we are making sure that everybody, when booking the facility, is aware of what is required and what is expected, and that will be enforced. And for the most part, people are pretty darn excited just to have things going. I actually plan on when leaving here tonight to go over and to see how we're doing tonight. Our booking started at 4 o'clock tonight and they go right till 10 o'clock. So the only thing I can say is that our staff are fully aware of what the regulations are. The regulations actually did a pretty darn good job of saying exactly what is allowed and what isn't. And the people that have discussed with me the option of is, well, can mom or dad go out? And when I've said no, they absolutely cannot, and we'll lose this ability to do this if we even, like you mentioned, we'll get into trouble if we don't. But yes, there may be situations where our staff are having to deal with patrons a little more regularly in the past, but we're prepared to do that and pretty excited for the opportunity for the kids. And then even just if I can also just kind of mention that I really like that Councillor Holmes, that you mentioned that because that is one thing I didn't mention in my report. But well, I did mention in my report, but verbally I didn't bring up the fact that if the construction project actually gets done early, there's an opportunity possibly, if council approves it, and there would have to be a special request for that, for the ice to go in a few weeks earlier or a week earlier and allow some of these user groups to do some camps in a cost recovery situation for the town, but they could also cost recover some of what they've lost, try to generate some more interest back to the sport. And so that's been talked about a little bit. We've kept it as a maybe because you never know how construction projects are going to go. What I do want to reiterate here though is I know that if we were to shut down tomorrow, I won't have the construction project going next week. It's at least a couple weeks out, and that's the only reason why I feel confident in saying that the ice is already in. A lot of the expenses up front are there. It is a service to the community, to answer to your first question, and we won't be putting off the construction project any longer. We'll still be getting it here as quick as we can if you were to look and entertain it either February 22nd or March 1st.
Councillor Simpson?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm in favor of either waiting till February 22nd or March 1st. I think we maybe can talk to the construction companies and maybe ask when they can start, because I do believe if these user groups can get to use, hopefully everything will be okay come their new season, and if they can get started a little bit early. But I also think we need to instead of just shutting it down tomorrow and then leaving it empty till the construction company can start. I think if we can get some kids on the ice, get some adults on the ice, I think physical activity means a ton to people's mental health too. So at least they would be able to use it for a couple more weeks while we're waiting for the construction to start anyways. So I would kind of, before picking a date like that, I would kind of like a date when the construction company can actually start.
Councillor Lloyd and then Councillor Chapman.
Thank you, Your Worship. I totally agree with Brianne. I think the kids need something right now. I'm really encouraged by the fact that there's a lot of bookings. I would for sure want it open during family week.
Okay, Councillor Chapman.
Yeah, thank you, Worship, and thank you, Russ, for all your hard work. I know I had one user group talk to me, and we're really grateful for your communication and your presence and understanding of them. I will be speaking to that a little later on. But I think the three things that I'm looking at for tonight, and I know that others have already spoken very clearly and loudly on that as well, and that is, I think that an on-time start for the fall is really more important than what we have right now. I think we'll have a better product. And just like Main Street will certainly, the short-term pain there will certainly be a great lift when we can open up in the fall, and even if we can open up a little earlier. Number two, as Councillor Lloyd had mentioned, Family Day weekend is really important, and so I believe, along with Councillor Simpson, that and others, that really the mental health of others is really important, and that we're able to kind of strike that balance, that opportunity where while we can still use it if the construction people are not able to get in till a little later on. Number three is I noticed on your report there that some of the other municipalities who are staying open, and looks like Tabor is staying open, and if that being the case, whether there might be something you could strike with Tabor, for example, and see if there are some win-win opportunities there for this situation.
There was a lot said, so Russ, maybe you want to just tie all of those up.
So in an effort to kind of make it a little simpler for you guys, because I appreciate the comments and Councillor Simpson, I can confirm that if we're removing the ice the week of March the 1st, I can confirm that construction will then will be there to do their first portion. I want to make it very clear that it won't look like a whole bunch is going on right at first because of the testing that takes place, but I can confirm that March the 1st they can be ready for that. I just couldn't confirm that February the 22nd. So if you were to make a motion like that, I could schedule it as such for the first part of March. That's the best I can do for now, because they're really kind of, until you give me a date, I can't really tell you whether I can be there, but I can confirm that that'll take a few days of removal, and things could certainly get going in March, and we could gain 4 weeks. Actually, it ends up being almost 4.5 weeks. And then Councillor Chapman, I appreciate that. We are in contact with pretty regularly with the people around us for those purposes, to kind of try to find out where the impact is, what we can do. And like I said earlier, because Tabor and Lethbridge actually normally has 4 ice surfaces they carry throughout the year, they're talking this year about 3 ice surfaces. Raymond, again, like I said, I couldn't confirm today, but I believe their ice actually did end up staying in, but they're looking at how much longer. So I can't answer for any other community. However, I can say that I will be in contact with those other communities, and will, wherever I can, provide an opportunity for people that are looking for ice in Coaldale to find ice elsewhere if it's after the date that we're removing the ice.
Okay, Councillor Avery.
Thank you, Worship. So I'm still struggling with losing another 25%, leaving it open for another 14 or 21 days. So, initially we're going to lose 275 a day. Now with COVID and the restrictions, $400 a day. And we don't know if this is Coaldale taxpayers. What are we subsidizing 25% of non-Coaldale residents to use this? There's just not a good, if we're going to make a decision by facts and evidence, Russ presented that we're going to lose 25% more by leaving it open. I agree with the mental health of the children, but is it our children? Is it children from outside communities that we're supporting with that 25%? And, when we were talking budget last meeting or the meeting before, we were $55,000 short. So now we're going to be running another $8,400 short for 3 weeks of operation. Where's that money coming from? So, we just keep putting ourselves every meeting further and further in the hole because we're making decisions that we're losing money. And I don't see how we can continue doing this and be sustainable and having a zero tax increase year after year. We cannot keep spending and sustaining what we're doing.
Can I? Yeah, sorry. Thanks, Councillor Avery. I should clarify that 25% conversation was as a global looking at the entire year. Right now, and I know I gave you some numbers that on regularly where our cost recovery on arenas is around, my estimate is $294.25 a day, and it is $100 more than that. But the biggest expense is the existing staffing that still is there, that is still working, but still could accommodate these bookings, and that staffing's at $500. So the reality of that actually is the longer you keep the ice in, if we continue to have bookings, but unless we lay off all of our staff, if we continue to have bookings, we're actually improving that 25% and improving our cost recovery at this point in time. If we were to lay off with 3 additional full-time staff, which I understand is an option for sure. However, we're keeping them busy on a number of fronts. I know that even in operations, there's been a position that's been held off on because our guys have been able to get out and do some work on reflectors, on bollards, and all these other things. We are busy. I want to make that clear, but the staffing is the largest aspect of that. And unless the decision is to lay off staff, we're actually improving our cost recovery by taking these bookings at this time.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So from my understanding, when you book some ice, you have to give your name and your address. So if somebody gives a non-county of Lethbridge or non-Coaldale residents address, could we not charge them the full price of the ice, but our county and our Coaldale residents are given the discounted rate?
Yeah, we could certainly do that. When we chose to go to $75 an hour, it was based upon when it was one-on-one instruction and up to 3 instructors and 3 participants on the ice. So we were just trying to get that supply and demand, that booking. Now that there are 10 and there's groups, I think that would have less of an impact. If we would have done that prior to, I think that we wouldn't have had 40 bookings this week. But I am fully prepared to follow a direction such as that, for sure. And I'm sorry, I know this is a ton of information, and I think these are all really good questions. Look, I do want to kind of go back to, regardless, whatever decision you make tonight, I'm an ambassador for you, and I will do whatever I can to make it work with our user groups and the people that are here, whether it's here or elsewhere. And we're prepared to do whatever council wants us to do.
Councillor Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. So I'll make a motion to direct staff to continue with the status quo and hold on to the ice until March 1st. So the ice would close the day before. March 1st would be the first day it's officially closed.
And then you want to have any direction about the rate?
No, we'll just leave it as is.
Okay, so we have that motion by Councillor Simpson. Any discussion? Okay, I don't see any, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, so we have Councillor Chapman, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Pauls, Councillor Lloyd, and myself in favor. Opposed? Councillor Holm and Councillor Avery is opposed. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Russ. And then you have the last item, I think, Coaldale Copperheads Junior Hockey, item 7.6.
Yeah, you bet. Thank you. Yeah, in light of time, I'll kind of give you a little bit of an overview on this. I received this letter. I believe you guys may have received the letter as well in correspondence, or at least some of you. And as we're all aware, the 2021 year has been unpredictable for everybody. The Copperheads are no different. They've had a tough go of it, trying to get going, back going, and again and again. So they're dealing with two real issues here, two separate ones within the letter, and that's the 2020 community grant. They were awarded $10,000 from the community grant in 2020. They've used about $2,000 of that, so they have sitting in a bank $8,000. And so that's the first this first issue that they're addressing in their letter. And then the second issue is advertising and sponsorship agreement. And as you're all aware, they do the advertising in the arena, and then each year there's 30% of that revenue that they gain over and above their expenses and things like that. They give back to Friends of the Arena. So 10% represents their donation, 10% is minor hockey, and 10% figure skating. And so, as you can imagine, they've got some money in for 2020. However, they can't really put a value on what those people that bought those advertisements or how they're going to fill. And so they're working with them as we speak about the possibility of a 2-for-1 for this coming year and things like that. So coming back to what they're asking and what our options really are on the first item, the community grant, and Kelly says they're prepared to do this. From an administrative perspective, you'll see our recommendations are option 2s in both situations because we feel like it's likely the easiest way to less amount of work for everybody. But the first option would be that they actually return the funds back to the community grant option and reapply in 2021. Or we could allow them to carry over those funds and then take that into consideration if they do apply in 2021 for the community grant. And on the other item for advertising and sponsorship, we could very similar ask them to pay the monies that they've got in right now and then readapt them and readjust them once they realize what 2020 really was and what the financial impact. The second option is probably going to be a lot easier, where they can actually report back to us. We do somewhat of a little bit of an audit of their advertisements and things like that. And if we pair 2020 and 2021 together, there won't be a back and forth. We could take that money, we could take that payment for both years at one time, and it would be an accurate assumption. Well, it won't be assumption, and an accurate fixed amount that they know they received. And and I mean, that fund right now, last we checked, was right around $100,000. They are looking at helping that group. To give you a little idea of the Friends of the Arena, that group is helping with funding of the Zamboni. They're also helping with the funding of rehabbing a dressing room underneath the bleachers to provide, when they're doing half ice, provide an additional dressing room for little kids. So yeah, that's and so my recommendation in both situations would be option 2. And in the first situation, the council allow the remaining funds for the 2020 grant carried forward to the next season. Further, the administration should consider those funds as part and parcel of the 2021 application, thus lowering the year's amount available to the Copperheads. And in the situation of the advertising and sponsorship, the council defer the 30% payment for 2020 included in the 2021 payment when the Copperheads have an accurate account of the total impact and full representation of the money earned for both years. Any questions?
Oh, Council, any questions of Russ? I guess just on a related topic, but a little bit different. Are you aware of any other groups that are caught up in the community grant program where they haven't been able to utilize the funds that we gave out? And would it be worthwhile for council to entertain an extension to all those community grants, so that it's quite likely that quite a few of them then get a chance to do what they intended to do? But I'm not sure if you're aware of anything or not.
That's a really good question. And I'm not aware of anybody else that's in this situation. Maybe it's a timing situation, or they've adapted things like, for instance, the Fun Run is looking at doing it in a little different way this coming year. Mind you, that wasn't a community grant. Sorry, I misspoke on that, because that's an actual separate budget item of $1,000. But I'm not aware of any. So it actually, I appreciate the gesture, and it might be good that if you guys are good with this one, if anybody else comes forward in the same circumstance, I appreciate that, Your Worship. That's a great idea.
Okay. So then, yeah, I'm support your option 2 items on both of them. Any member of council, Councillor Holm?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I would move option 2 for the community grants option, and option 2 for the advertising and sponsorship, and also that option on the community grants option be extended to any other 2020 grants that we had put forward.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so we have a motion by Councillor Holm, and I'll ask if there's any discussion. I'm not seeing any, so I'll call the question. All in favor? Okay, and that's everybody. So myself, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Holm, Councillor Simpson, Councillor Pauls, Councillor Avery, and Councillor Lloyd are all in favor. So it's unanimous. Thank you, Russ.
You're welcome. Have a good night, everybody.
Okay, and I think, I'm not sure Chief McEwen needs time to queue up his presentation or not, but he's next at item 8.1. Welcome, Chief.
Hi there, good evening. Mayor and Council, thanks for having me on tonight. So what I have is the 2020 year-end report to inform Council on our operations over the last year. So a challenge for us this year was maintaining our high level of service while navigating and responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. So new operating training procedures were developed to ensure the safety of our staff while continuing to provide service to our community without any degradation in the level of service. So we were able to quickly adapt to a rapidly changing environment and maintain our consistent operations, which was great. And you know, although 2020 was challenging and difficult for our department on several fronts, there's a lot of successes that we can be proud of. And that was observed by the 2020 year in review video that the town of Coaldale recently released. Emergency services played a big part of that, on top of a lot of great things happening in the town of Coaldale over the last year. So I will just have some slides. They are in your agenda package as well, but I will just try to share the screen so it's a little bit easier to follow. May or may not work, but okay. So kind of looking at the year and our call volume, looking at a 5-year call total. Again, this year we did have a record year for incidents, 466, which was up 11% as compared to 2019. Of those, 193 were fire calls and 273 were medical. So busy year for us. I kind of broke it down by month so we can have a look at how the entire year went as far as calls. As we know, we kind of headed into lockdowns kind of mid-March and into April. And we can kind of see our call volume dropped off quite significantly there for a couple months. We had a lot of less people out, or a lot of less vehicles on the highway, less MVCs, stuff like that. But once we started to open up again in the summer, our calls kind of shot back and progressed quite heavily. It got pretty busy towards the end of the year. December, we had the most calls I think we've ever done in a month, 53 calls, which was 36% higher than December 2019. So out of those 53 calls, 32 were medical, and we had 21 fire calls in December. So looking at the breakdown from town of Coaldale versus calls in Lethbridge County, 314 calls for service were in the town of Coaldale, and we had 152 out in the county in 2020. Looking at the town of Coaldale, so those 314 calls we did, 70% of those were medical first response calls, 221, and 30% were fires, fire-related calls, so MECs, false alarms, actual fires, 93 calls in the town of Coaldale. So again, kind of the opposite in the county. We do far more fire-related calls in the county than medical. So 100 fire calls and 52 medical calls in Lethbridge County last year. Kind of look at calls by type. So what types of calls we went on. Again, medical making up the majority there, 59%. Next would be alarms. This is continues to get a little bit higher that we're seeing. We're responding to quite a few false alarms, so something that we're definitely keeping an eye on. And fire and MVCs is 9% each, and mutual aid were 4%. This was a little bit higher in 2020 versus past years, where mutual aid usually takes up about 1% of our calls, but we saw quite a few times we were called out to assist other departments in the county, like City of Lethbridge and Pitcher Butte. We had quite a few mutual aid calls with them last year. Hours spent on calls. So 2020, we spent 52% of our time out in Lethbridge County, so it was 211 hours. So even though significantly less calls in the county, we're spending far more time out there because these are those complex fires, bigger incidents, MVCs that were on the highway for hours at a time. So that's making up majority of the hours there. And when we look at, for our fire agreement, we cap our medical calls. So our medical calls in the town of Coaldale, we cap them at 15 minutes and half hour for the county. So when you look at the ratio that way, 62% of our time was spent in the county in 2020 versus only 38% in the town of Coaldale. And keep in mind that is just with the medical capped time. As far as person hours, so firefighter hours spent just over 3,500 hours on incidents and a lot of hours on training. Even though we were shut down for a little bit, we managed to continue to train safely, again, by splitting up in smaller groups and doing our best to follow guidelines that way. But over 4,200 hours in staff training over 2020 last year. Code red calls, obviously something we keep a close eye on, and we finished the year at 16, which definitely was a little bit better than 2019. Looking at our dollar loss fires, so we had less fires last year compared to 2019. So 9 fairly significant fires that would result in property lost. So that was estimated at $592,000. However, when we look at property saved by our actions, it's over $1 million estimate of property saved. In our fire prevention and public education division, we kept up with our fire inspections in the town. We completed 153 fire inspections. Home safety inspections, we only did 2, and smoke alarm replacements only 2. Usually this would be a little bit higher, but because we're trying not to go into too many people's houses right now if we don't need to, that was down a little bit And of course, we missed out on doing our fire prevention open house this year as well. So that's not on here for 2020. But we did have some really good PR. I've talked about it a couple times with Operation Celebration during the lockdown period, where we did 142 birthday celebrations. Looking at our training a little bit more in depth, there was our core training, which is our regular Monday and Wednesday nights, just over 2,000 hours. That's firefighter hours put in. And then courses would be on top of that core training, weekends, nights, stuff like that. And that's an additional 2,200 hours of training that we did. So we brought on 9 new paid on call firefighters in 2020. So we have them doing their basic firefighter 1001 level 1 right now. We had 6 firefighters complete their level 2. The 1041 level 1 and level 2 is fire instructor. So we had 1 person complete level 1 and level 2 in that. 1021 level 1 and level 2 is officer training. So we had 9 people take those courses. And the Wildland S215, we had Clearwater County firefighters come down and do some training with us on that. And that's kind of standardized training to wildland urban interface type fires. So if we were to get called to assist another municipality or something in the fire protection area, like Waterton Lakes National Park again, then we have some of that additional training to be able to do that. So even though, like I said, we were kind of shut down for a few weeks here and there during the lockdown, we were still able to continue on with a lot of training. Kind of looking back at some of the 2020 highlights, we had the Fire Service Training Program grant that we got in 2018. That we did get an extension from the province for, and we were able to complete all that training. So that was $16,000 grant that we went into as a region and completed all that training. We moved into our fire hall phase 1 just about a year ago, February 2020. We had some big capital projects that we completed. Our self-contained breathing apparatus. We had all new packs and air cylinders replaced, and vehicle extrication tools have been purchased. So we're just waiting on delivery from those, but it should be pretty soon. We recruited 10 new paid on call firefighters, including 3 females, which was great to see. Operation Celebration, again, was a big highlight, I think, for us. We're able to deliver our services safely and effectively through the pandemic. Record number of incidents, lots of training hours, like I talked about. And we also started the mental health program last year. So we had 41 psychology sessions by our members, and I think that's really great to see. Obviously, there was a need there for that, and I think it's a great program that we have in place, and hopefully we'll continue that on. And I do apologize, I did not add this slide into your agenda item, so I just added it on now to talk about. So if you need any more information on this, I'm happy to send it out at a later time. But I'd like to touch on an initiative that Council did direct us to start last year, which is the volunteer firefighter tax credit and business tax credit. So we had 19 firefighters out of 21 that were eligible. So we had 90% inclusion for our members, which was exactly what we had forecasted, which is awesome to see. So that was $17,000 in credits given out to the volunteers themselves. And on the business tax side of things, we had 5 businesses that were eligible to get some level of the credit. And that was $5,600 that we handed out. This was a little bit lower than anticipated. So it might be a good time. Like, I know it was a new initiative and we had the sliding scale set for the businesses, but it might be something we want to look at tweaking to make it a little bit easier for businesses to qualify for more of the credit. We had 1 business that was eligible for 100% of the credit and 1 that was eligible for 80%. And the other 3 were 40% or 20%. And the ones that got 100% and 80%, they are kind of the bigger size employers that have multiple staff or multiple volunteers that are on that, working for that employer that can leave. So it makes it a little bit easier for them. So there might be a little bit of a disadvantage to our more smaller employers in town that might only have 1 or 2 staff, and they lose 1 person during the day. Well, it's a big effect on their daily operations versus some of these bigger employers that maybe can handle losing 1 or 2 for a little bit. So it might be something we want to look at to make it a little more easier for some of these smaller businesses to qualify for this. And we still have the room in the budget. We had budgeted 31,750 and we only came in at 22. So even if we did tweak the business credit a little bit, I think we'll still be well within that 31. So I'm happy to hear any feedback or direction on that as well. Okay, so moving on, we did have the fire underwriter survey start and a full assessment on the town of Coaldale in early 2020, and it just wrapped up first thing this year. So what they do is analyze fire response capabilities of our fire department to commercial, industrial, and residential fire risks, and then assign a score. So you kind of hear them talk about fire grades or town grades. This is what they're kind of dealing with. So we went through a full assessment on this. So I do have some slides just to talk about that a little bit. So the public fire protection classification, this is on a scale based out of 10, with 1 being the very, very best, the highest level of fire protection, great water supply, full-time staff, stuff like that, to 10, which is basically little to no fire protection at all. So it kind of says how well your community is equipped to deal with major fires. So the PFPC is for industrial, commercial, multifamily, residential type stuff, your higher risk facilities in town. So what they analyze and assess on our department and our town, 40% of the weighting is the fire department itself. So they look at what type of apparatus we have, the number and age condition of our apparatus, the pumping capacity, right? How much water we can flow with it. They look at our staffing, do we have full-time, how many volunteers, our training they look at, and pre-incident planning. Water supply, they really look at the reliability of the system itself, fire pumps, hydrants, condition and testing of the hydrants and distribution. And then they kind of look at our fire prevention. So are we following our quality management plan through the safety codes? Are we doing fire inspections? Are we doing public educations, pre-plans on buildings, stuff like that? And then I look at making sure we have accredited dispatch center, good radios, and means of getting the alarms so we can actually get to the fire. So I'll just kind of go through those 4 groups on how we got scored. So this is the scoring, again, 40%, so the highest weighted scores as they look at the fire department itself. So a couple places where we got additional scoring where we didn't have before is number 2, ladder service. Number 4, engine and ladder pump capacities. And number 9, master and special stream devices. So because of our procurement of our ladder truck, which has an elevated master stream, that gave us some additional scoring that we didn't have before when we didn't have that truck. So the investment in that piece of apparatus is now paying a little bit of dividends as it has given us some more credit with the fire underwriters and actually helped us improve our score, which I'll talk about. So the red is available credit as well too. So you can see total fire force available. There's a lot of room there. And I had a discussion about them on why that is so low. And part of it is the amount of staffing that you do have. So we are looking for the past number of years. We've been trying to up our full-time, sorry, not full-time, volunteer staffing up to 40. So we're continuing to do that to try to get there. And by doing that, we can get a little more credit on how many volunteers we have. But a portion of that as well too is full-time staff. And because we don't have full-time staff here 24/7, then we're not eligible for some of that scoring. Just quickly looking at water supply, for the most part, we're doing quite well in the town for our reliability of our water system. The only two areas there would be our fire flow delivered by the mains themselves and our distribution of hydrants. Fire safety and control, looking at fire prevention and public education. So giving us credit for what we do for the fire inspections and codes enforcement. And then we had to have a quality management plan with building inspectors and electrical code inspectors that are signing off on permits and everything like that. So we did identify an area for improvement is also pre-incident planning. So that's something we want to look at as a department and do some more planning. So something we can build into our fire inspections when we're out in the community doing inspections on businesses, that we can actually start building some more pre-plans. So when we get a call there, we already know the layout and what the hazards are and stuff like that. So that was identified as an area for improvement. And not a whole lot of room for improvement here. Emergency communications, we're really good. Got a majority of credits for all of that. So in summary, again, this is the PFPC is a score out of 10. So our classification actually improved from a 6 to a 5. So I think that's really good and a testament to you know, our community and our town, what we have for a fire department, and that we're able and have the capacity to deal with large major fires. And this will filter down hopefully to the business community as well too, because insurers use these gradings on fire insurance premiums. So there is a chance that within a couple months once this is published, that our community members might be seeing some savings in fire insurance for commercial. Another thing they look at is our ability to respond to fires in single family dwellings and small buildings. This is on a scale out of 5. So we're unchanged in this area, and we will remain unchanged. This is the highest we could go is a 3A until there's staffing here 24/7. So there has to be someone on staff here at night to go any higher on this rating. So on the dwelling protection grade, we are exactly where we were the last time they did an assessment on that. So some things looking ahead for 2021. Fire hall completion, we're eyeing up this month, pending everything goes well here in the last push to get in. We did our deficiency walkthrough last week, so we hope we can get those addressed soon, and we can get into our new building, which is exciting. We're going to be doing some planning this year. So 2021, we've had a lot of big items completed in 2020 over the past couple of years. So it'll be a good year to take a step back and really kind of look at the future of our fire department and see where we want to go from here, and hopefully work on some plans. So looking at opening up our strategic plan process again, getting that started, and how we're going to keep pace with growth from an emergency services perspective. As you know, with the annexed area, our town has grown substantially with a lot of interest and development in those areas. We have to take a step back and really have a look from a fire service perspective, how we can continue servicing that area. So talking to Spencer already about that, and just making sure that emergency services is consulted before we go ahead with any further developments, specifically residential in those areas. We'd like to build a fire master plan this year, just to chart the growth and look at the next 10 years and how we can handle and manage that growth. Lethbridge County Fire and Rescue Services Agreement. So our agreement did expire on December 31st, 2020. We are now in a 1-year automatic renewal with them. So I anticipate some more dialogue here early in 2021 with the county. So we have that to look forward to as well. And just a quick plug for the Peace Officer Program. We have the posting out right now for the Manager of Community Policing. We've had about 12 applicants. So we're going to be filtering through those and hopefully scheduling some interviews shortly for that position. And that is it for my report. Thank you for your time. I'm happy to take any questions or hear any feedback.
Well, thank you, Chief McEwen, for your report. And as always, on behalf of myself and council, thank you to you and the members of your department for everything they do. It's always amazing how many hours you work, and then plus you do enormous amount of training in that as well. So it's really a testament to the professionalism of your department, and it's very proud to have such a good organization in the town of Coaldale. So I'll open the floor up to council if they have any questions. I'm not seeing, there we go, okay. So I think Councillor Holm?
Thank you, Worship. I'm just wondering, with our medical calls, with the change in how the dispatch is happening provincially and stuff, are we going to see any impact on that as far as our numbers going down, because all of a sudden we may not be in that loop of the original call coming through?
In response to Councillor Holm, thanks for your question. We don't expect any decrease in the amount of calls. It's based on the medical first response chart. So we signed up through the MFR program, and that lists every type of call that we will respond to. So that gets run through CAD. So they have that now up in Calgary. So when they start to process the call, it will pop up on their screen saying this is a fire response and to dispatch Coaldale Fire Department to that call. So unless they make a mistake and miss that part, I guess there's a small potential there, but we haven't seen any issues or any proof of that happening right now.
Councillor Chapman?
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Chief, for your presentation and some great reports there and great numbers looking forward. My only question to you is with regard to your 3A rating. Is that fairly comparable to other municipalities of our size and capacity?
Through to Councillor Chapman. Yes, that's a very average rating for a municipality of our size. Again, that really has to do with staffing. So regardless of how amazing your fire department is or how many pieces of apparatus you have, if you don't have that full-time staffing, you're not going to get any higher than that 3A. So a lot of departments like us that are composite, that we rely on volunteers and paid on call staff, are around that 3A.
I'll just interrupt and interject that Councillor Pauls has left the meeting due to physical medical things, so he's logged off and he won't be rejoining us. So Lana can show him that he's left the meeting right about now, I guess. And, okay, sorry for the interruption. Any other questions of Chief McEwen? I don't see any, so it looks like you're good to go, Chief. Thank you very much for a great presentation, and again for all the work that you and your department do. And
okay, thank you very much for your time, and I'll pass the thanks on to our members. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. I'll entertain a motion to receive Chief McEwen's presentation for information. Councillor Lloyd, any discussion? Call the question, all in favor? Okay, and that's carried 6 votes, myself, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Avery, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Holm, and Councillor Simpson. So unanimous vote of the remainder of council that's present. So then the next item of business is section 11, information items, 11.1 through the 11.6. Are there any items in that body of work that anybody wants to draw any particular attention to? If there aren't any, Councillor Holm?
I would move those for information.
Councillor Holm moves all the contents of section 11, 11.1 through to 11.6 inclusive for information. Any discussion? I don't see any. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that's 6 in favor. Myself, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Avery, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Holm, and Councillor Simpson are all in favor. And then we a motion to go into the closed session. Councillor Simpson moves us into closed session. All in favor? Okay, and that's carried unanimously. Myself, Councillor Lloyd, Councillor Avery, Councillor Chapman, Councillor Holm, and Councillor Simpson. And we'll dial into the closed session right away then.